Now we're going to pass on to Jess. Jess is a story artist who loves dragons, mythology and nature. Made a Games Grump animated one time. Nowadays spends her time art directing narrative games and the World of Warcraft YouTube channel. So at this point, I'll pass on to Jess.
Hello everyone, my name is Jess. I'm here to speak to you a little bit about what it's like to draw video games for a living, particularly in Northern Ireland. Just to give you a quick overview of what I'm going to cover, I'm first going to introduce myself and talk a little bit about where I came and what I've done. I'm going to give a very rough, very loose overview of the video game pipeline, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about where art fits into that pipeline. And then whatever time I have left, I'm just going to try and give whatever advice I can think of. Just to introduce myself, my name is Jess. I grew up in Newcastle in County Down and I've lived in Northern Ireland my whole life. I studied animation at Ulster University, and currently I'm the art director for Coffee Box Games and Better Gaming, and I've been in the games industry for 4 years now. My whole life I wanted to draw creatures and monsters for a living. I wanted to do it as a kid, and I wanted to do it when I grew up, and somehow I managed to get here. This is a drawing of my character Scrap from whenever I was 11, the first ever drawing of him. And this is one from a couple of months ago, so as you can tell, not a lot has changed, but I've just got a couple more tricks up my sleeve. My claim to fame is that I did a Game Grumps animated one time. I was a long time fan. I emailed to ask if I could do one, and they were like, yeah, sure, and then they gave me money to do it. It was the first time I'd ever experienced a lot of people seeing something that I'd made, and it was really interesting and scary, and obviously didn't go all that well all the time. My favourite game growing up was Ratchet & Clank, which, as I was making this presentation, I realised that it came out before most of the kids were born. Since then, there have been a couple more, so you've no excuse for not knowing what it is. A couple of years ago, I actually had the absolute delight of attending a workshop by the game designer of my favourite game. His name was Brian Algar, and I learned a lot, and he did these very lovely drawings for me. As I said before, I studied animation at Ulster University. I thought that I was never going to be able to do what I wanted in Northern Ireland. I thought I was going to have to go to America, and my plan was to study in England and then go to LA. But then the course lecturer managed to charm me onto the course by telling me that he'd been to the birthday party of the director of my favourite movie at the time, which was How to Train Your Dragon. And obviously that worked, but more importantly, it proved to me that just because I lived in Northern Ireland, it didn't mean that resources were super limited or that I couldn't do what I wanted to do. In my third year of university, for my placement, I joined a studio called Coffee Box Games. At the time, it was very small, it was just a baby, and it had been just started by a YouTuber and a playwright. Our first game was Stanbury's Mistake. We made it for NI We never did finish it because it ended up the market had moved on at the time, and it did make sense for us to finish it. But I was a 2D animator, and it was a big learning experience. I even got to go to Amsterdam and Unite, where we got to go to panels and meet experts and mentors from the game engine that we were using at the time. And then I went back and graduated, and then I came back to Coffee Box Games afterwards. We got a new office, and we got started on our next project, which was How to Kill Monsters. This one was for UK Games Fund. It was a project that helped newly graduated teams make games. Again, it was side-scrolling, it was 2D, and we went to EGX and presented it to publishers and got to show it to the public, which was very scary because they're right there. It's a little bit different than comments on the internet, but it was a great experience, although we came home and realised that it was just too big a project for the team that we had at the time. So we focused a little bit for a while on the YouTube channels. We gave Get Better Gaming a makeover and made another channel so that we weren't just focused on World of Warcraft. We started a Patreon to make our own money so that we could become self-sufficient and self-publish. It meant that people could pay a certain amount a month for extra rewards, which we could do because we had a really good art team. And because we had a good art team, we decided that our next game project would be a narrative game where it was really focusing on story and what it would look like. At the time, Michael was really into 1900s expeditions and the golden ages of exploration, so we decided to do something based on the Shackleton expedition, which is where you play as a new captain who has to lead your team through the Antarctic, keep everyone alive and keep everyone happy at the same time. We've actually announced this one. There's a website and everything, and the audience knows about it, so we actually have to finish it. And we're going to do that by following the video game pipeline. There's 3 main stages to making a video game. It starts pre-production, then production, then post-production. Pre-production is all planning. It's where you do the first bits of concept art, you figure out your ideas, and you decide what you want to do. Production is making the thing. It's actually creating all of the art, all of the levels, all of the script, all of the code, and then post-production is fixing it and making it work and testing it and adding the final touches for it to actually go out into the public. And of course, artists are needed for every single step along the way. The first thing I could say, oh, I've skipped it. Sorry, I'm going back to across the pipeline. You have different kinds of artists, and some people are specialists and some people are generalists. In the AAA industry, a lot of people are specialists, where you'll have one person that does one job very, very well, and that works whenever you have really, really big teams. But in Northern Ireland, we're only indie, so we have very small teams, and everyone has to do lots of different things, which is what most people can do anyway. The first thing that gets done in any project is concept art, the goal of which is to oversee, sort of figure out and try and think of what the overall project is going to look like whenever it's finished. You have to think about tone and experience and what people are going to feel whenever they actually interact with the game when it's out. Storyboards is a little bit like a cross between animation and comics. The whole purpose of this is to take the script and the game design document and figure out what it might look like and break it down into steps for the rest of the team. Character design is very much what it says in the tin. Your purpose is to figure out the character's personality and what they do in the game and what their role in the story is, and figure out what that might look like visually. And environment design is exactly the same, but for environments. Although when it comes to games, obviously environments also go hand in hand with levels. And for both of these tasks, you'll be creating references for the rest of the team. Sometimes references are very detailed and you have to do turnarounds and figure out what it looks like for every angle. This can either be used as reference just for drawing, or you can use it to create models, which we did in this case. We made a model of our ship so that we could turn it around in 3D space and draw it from different angles, because trying to figure out with your mind is very hard. If this were a final, if the game were 3D and final, we would unwrap this and colour in the textures that way, but instead what we did was we made a grey box, which is just a scene with no textures on it, to figure out where everything goes, and then we painted over it because it suited our style much better because it's a 2D game. My first job in games was an animator. For Stanbury's mistake, it was hand drawn, so I had to hand draw every single frame and then move them really fast, and it makes it look like it's moving, which I love to do, but it's a lot of work. So for the next game, we did rigged animation, which is pretty much the same in 2D and 3D. It's where you create your character and then you put bones into it, which you then can animate and move. Now I work as an art director, which means that basically it means that I tell the other artists what to do. But what I do is I have to figure out what this overall style of the game looks like, and I have to make sure that everyone else stays in that style. I talk to the director and I think about story and and subpoints. That is apologies. Sometimes that means that I do drawings and I help artists figure out what everything is going to look like, and sometimes it means that I write lots of documents, which is another part of the job. Because Coffeebox is so small, I am also a producer, which means that I also make schedules, and I have to do lots of things that I don't like to do, which brings us to the first piece of advice, which is you don't always get to draw what you want to do. Getting to draw for a living is wonderful and it's amazing, but you don't always get to do what you want to do, because that's just the nature of what it is whenever it's a job. There's a saying in video games that you're not a proper video game artist until you've drawn a crate, and sometimes someone has to draw the crate. Of course, because video games are so difficult and they're so intricate, there's lots of different kinds of people that are needed to work together to make it work. Communication skills, I personally believe, are more important than art skills. Your art is always going to improve no matter what, as long as you keep practicing, but communication skills sometimes take a little bit more nuance. In a good team, other people's strengths make up for your weaknesses, and the vision is shared by everyone. Sometimes it's dictated to you by a client, but very often you get to have your own flavour on your part. But sometimes you need to be able to take feedback, so you might be told that you might have to let go of ideas that you really like, and you might have to work really hard on ideas that you like less. My advice is to try and make friends with your team, because then whenever you don't like the work, at least your team can be your motivation. And sometimes they make memes, like this one about the fact that our main character looks a little bit like a character from a different video game. But yeah, just to finish off, I would like to say that when it comes to art, it isn't always, whenever it comes to art, doing it for a living means that sometimes you won't always enjoy it. And in order to cope with that, I would say that you need other interests. Whenever your art is a job, if you want to work in video games, that means you already have an interest above art. That includes video games. So that's a good start. But I would suggest to hold on to other things that give you joy, other hobbies that will keep you sanity and make you well-rounded. And other hobbies will also make your art improve. I personally really like reptiles, and that means that I study them and I research them and I care for them. And that means that I draw them really well whenever I do it for fun, and also means whenever I'm lucky enough to draw it for work, I can draw them pretty well then too. Am I good for time? I would just like to finish off by saying that Northern Ireland is a special place to live and it's a special place to work because everything is so small and close-knit. We don't have a lot of resources, but everything that we do is really experimental and new, and young people are the ones that are making the decisions and that are making the changes. And that means that the people that are here are special, and so are you. If you're an artist and you're passionate about something, that means that you have stories to tell and things to say. Your art belongs to you, and you're the one that makes it special. It's your individual personality, it's the things that you like, and it's the things that you enjoy, and that's what will make you shine. Yeah, the best art advice that I've ever received in my whole life is please exercise. Whenever you get older, to my age, your bones stop working and you don't feel as good anymore. You get stiff and sore, and whenever you draw, you're in the same position for a long time. So stretch, eat well, look after yourself, and then hopefully your career will last for a very long time. I'm very excited for you to get here, and thank you very much for your time.
So, welcome back. That was Jess just finishing off her talk, and the ideas and everything from it are very interesting in terms of what kind of experience she's had and what advice she gives. Now, obviously, kids, eat your greens. They're very good for you. Even at my age, it is, rickety bones, as my friends like to call it. But in general, just keep well and water. So now we're going to have a quick Q&A with Jess, if you'd like to come on over. And there's a microphone on the table whenever you're ready.
Hello, is it on? There we go.
Perfect. So, just going to start off. Obviously, you mentioned about your experience with Ulster University and the fact that you studied in very different fields and your experience is kind of broad with what you've done. What kind of was the general thing, best piece of advice that you've got from that? Obviously, eat your greens. That's the main thing. But the sort of thing that you kind of learned and said, this actually is what you would put everything. So, for example, mine might be breaking down problems into smaller chunks because Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
For me, the thing that makes me a good designer, I think, is being very conscious of what the person that sees it or interacts with it is going to think. So I come from animation, but designing for animation is a little bit different from designing for games, because with games, people are going to be playing with it, they're going to be interacting with it. And as an art director, my main priority is ensuring that the art facilitates helping the player feel a certain way. Whenever you have gameplay, you want people to feel, it has to feel fun. They have to there's something called juice, which is basically just like enhancing effects and making everything really punchy, so it's good to do stuff and interact with. Okay. Whenever it comes to art, the goal is to make the player feel something and understand the gameplay and understand the story. So I guess it's thinking about who's going to see it would be my main piece. Okay.
And then out of interest, what's your favorite color to work with?
My favorite color?
To work with.
My favorite color is green or teal, like a bluey-green.
You can imagine what teal is again.
It's a dark turquoise.
I know what turquoise is, actually. That was my favorite color. Okay. And then obviously with your software and your setup, you have a very portable idea to this. You don't have a station at home. You don't sit in an office, like do everything there. You have a very kind of frolics from place to place. I
do, yeah. Well, because whenever you are doing our assets specifically for the engine, you tend to have like a big powerful computer and a station, but I work on an iPad because I do a lot of sketching, because most of my work is idea stuff. I find an iPad really useful for that and working really fast. And also because things have to change a lot, and being able to adapt to that helps. Okay, I'm guessing Apple Pencil in the back. What, sorry? Do you have an Apple Pencil? Yeah. I was going to say, because I was like, Apple Pencil. So unfortunately I have the first generation, but I was like, is that Harry Potter? But yeah. A couple of viewers have thrown a few questions, so I'm going to bring them to you now. Do you have any recommendations on resources to help someone to learn to draw? To learn to draw? There's lots of books and things out there. The really wonderful thing is the internet is out there. Because whenever I first started working for Coffee Box, I had very limited experience as an animator. So like for the first 2 weeks, I basically just like looked at GDC talks, which those are a little bit advanced sometimes if you're really young, like between 9 and 10. But if you're a wee bit older, they're really useful. And I looked at a lot of other animation and YouTube tutorials. In terms of actually learning to draw, there are lots of books out there. Schoolism is a course online, but obviously it's a little bit pricey. But if you're really interested and really invested, it's worth the money. Anything else? Honestly, just the internet's a really good resource. I think I heard Kevin earlier say something about being able to Google stuff. That's a superpower, I promise.
Googling is like the best resource ever.
Yeah, it is.
But then I'm guessing as for yourself as well, would you tend to draw characters, or would it be like environments and such? Or
I would be a character artist personally.
Okay, so
but
kind of the bodies.
yeah, because of the Patreon, which focuses a lot on environment art, I've had to get good at environments.
But that's a progressive learning, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's like another thing. There's like a couple of different skills that you need for like characters. It's like acting and anatomy, which I've done for a long time, so I understand. Whenever it comes to environments, something like composition and perspective is a lot more important.
Perfect. So another question is, do you work more digital or on like dead tree paper, or is it a bit of both mostly?
It can be a bit of both. Before I got my iPad, actually, I would have done a lot more traditional, but iPad has sort of replaced paper for me because it's so fast and so interactive. Whenever it comes to working on a computer, there's almost like a bit of a disconnect. Where it takes a wee bit longer for things to happen, and there's lag, and Photoshop is complicated, and there's lots of tools. But I personally use digital a lot more. But of course, paper is just as good. There's no reason why you can't do that. A lot of the drawings in the first version of The Pale Beyond, the game that we're working on, are actually they're just pencil drawings that we scanned in and used those.
And then I'm guessing with tracing, then would come in handy just to kind of say to develop on a current draft.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And then obviously I know for myself I use like different notes and stuff for the iPad, but then you have a very kind of, well, I wouldn't even say niche, it'd be like a very kind of focused purpose for the pencil. Like obviously the digital kind of upbringing of, well, not styluses, but pencils and such and different tablets have really helped with that. Would you find digital quite different? Like, is it more useful, or would you say paper's very good to kind of get knuckled down with?
I think it depends on the person, because I know that I personally work a lot like how a traditional artist works. Like, I start with the pencil and I do the sketch and I do a lot. But I have a friend that draws with the lasso tool in Photoshop, and I know people that use a lot of the ways that digital advantages that digital has that traditional doesn't, which is stuff like filters and being able to change color really fast. Having an undo button is very nice. You don't have that in traditional.
I must admit, the amount of I know Sharpie is not a good thing to try and draw with, especially not on the wall. Granted, that was younger me, thankfully. But okay. Also, any tips on helping children be a bit more aware and a bit more creative, and potentially with their dreams, and exploring how to draw characters and such?
How to be a bit more creative, did you say?
Well, kind of exploring how to draw characters that they kind of imagine in their mind.
Okay, I guess, I mean, I would say just draw characters, but obviously that's very vague. So, I mean, I mentioned in the talk that my favorite video game is Ratchet and Clank. I drew a lot of Ratchet and Clank characters when I was little, and what I would do is I would copy the characters from the game, but then I would also make my own version, which is basically just like, oh, it's me, but I'm Ratchet. that sort of thing. But it's actually, honestly, I think that's a really good way to learn, because first of all, you're learning how to draw in another style. And then if you take that and try to make your own thing out of it, you're learning the process of, you have to be able to draw well to be able to draw your own characters in that style. And
the kind of the transformative aspect of that, you see something you like. I know Minecraft was mine because it's so simple. It's I say simple, but pixels, so simple.
Yeah, well, it's like the video game character Kirby was specifically designed to be easy to draw.
Just and 2 feet.
But honestly, fan art is a good way to do it because it's less intimidating than trying to come up with something from scratch. It's a good way to learn and build those muscles.
Just pulling out game covers and just, although not ruining the original one, obviously. The thing is, obviously, you have gone and travelled, and people are very different. Well, obviously, cultures-wise, people are very different. Have people different approaches in different places, or is it kind of the same thing everywhere? So if you were to walk into a company, it would kind of be the same kind of setup?
I think I'm really not sure. I don't have a lot of experience in AAA or anything. I basically worked for Coffee Box my whole life, but I've worked for other animation studios. But I think everywhere is a little bit slightly different. But the principles are basically the same. So it's we all have the same A to B to C, but how you get there is a little bit different every time. And sometimes it gets changed. Whenever we were in York speaking to publishers for for Transfuser, one of the pieces of advice that we were given was that we kind of had an advantage being in Northern Ireland because we weren't surrounded by other teams that were all kind of sort of pirating the same ideas around each other. That even though we don't have as many veterans or mentors here, it means that we have to come up with new ideas. But it also means that we're not getting the same ideas as everyone else. Of course, the internet sort of homogenizes everything a bit, but...
Just accumulates everything, because obviously Pinterest and such, people have a lot of kind of fan art and such, and subreddits and different things like that. Okay. Out of interest, so you have obviously been working on your iPad, and everything's been kind of based at home. Have there been any other hobbies you've been at, during lockdown?
Oh God, yeah.
This is the side projects that started.
Yeah, I was planning to talk about it a wee bit, but obviously I'm gonna talk very long. But last year I got really into plants. Because my main hobby is that I look after reptiles. I've got a snake and I've got a leopard gecko, and it means that
What's a leopard gecko?
It's like a little tiny lizard. It's like this size, and I have a tiny snake that also is about this size. But because I always loved dragons and I loved reptiles and I wanted to look after them, so I did a lot of research and I keep them as pets. But then I got into plants as well, and again, the part I liked about that was researching. And then over lockdown, I was missing my friends a lot and missing being around the office, so I got really into baking and cooking because I was just thinking about coming back to dinner parties.
It's like presenting like a plethora of baking.
Basically.
Okay.
Got really good at mac and cheese.
Oh, you know what, mac and cheese hits the spot. It's probably one of the best things. Although I can't really boil an egg, so not the best for me. But then plants and such, like, obviously not everything that you do, like hobbies-wise, becomes a job. So like a hobby's not a jobby. It's like
yeah,
you
I
just,
would recommend not making a job out of all of your hobbies.
Yeah. Profitability is not the main thing. But you've obviously looked and researched. And plants, though, I'm guessing the kind of agriculture aspect, or is it like, what part of plants?
Well, I keep houseplants. So it's just like, I started with succulents. Succulents are very easy to look after, but what happens with them is that they grow little baby plants off. So then I had to learn how to take them off and propagate them and start new ones. But historically, I had tried to get into plants a couple times before that, but historically I was very bad at it. But then I actually took the time and read about it and learned how to look after them before I tried, and it worked.
Perfect. I'm guessing all through Google, though?
A little bit of Google, a little bit of YouTube as
A
well.
little bit of books as well? Dead on. Okay. Well, to be honest, that was a very informative talk, a very interesting kind of perspective on things, especially now, personally, I know I use the iPad and I find it very useful. But thank you very much for coming along.
Thanks
very
for
appreciative
inviting
of the time that you took out for this. And for now, what's going to happen is we're going to pass on to the next part of the event, which is going to be the break. So the break is going to carry on for a couple of minutes. Again, rehydrate yourself, get a wee bit to eat, a couple of biscuits, and we'll join you after that.